Hey guys, another car vlog, and this time it's about the realities of being an entrepreneur. I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos, well, not so much, but I've seen a bunch of YouTube videos on being an entrepreneur, starting a business, and I feel there's a lot of misconceptions being spread around out there by people. So I just wanted to go over a few bullet points here to give you some idea of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and how the process typically unfolds. So just a little background, I've been doing this stuff for 28 years. Started my first business when I was 18, and I haven't worked for anybody since I was 18 or 19 years old. Last job I took working for somebody, I was a bouncer in a nightclub. So I have a long track record to base my opinions on, not just my opinions based on hearing what other people say. There's actual real world experience here. So I think the number one rule you have to understand about being an entrepreneur is that it's much more of a long distance run than a sprint. A lot of people like to look at examples of tremendous successes like Apple, Steve Jobs, or Zuckerberg and Facebook, or Bill Gates, Instagram. And these are super rare exceptions. This is like these are people who actually won the super lotto in business, in fact. And they are the first to admit it themselves. A huge part of being that successful in business has to do with dumb luck. Dumb luck. And if you actually look at the progression of the Google and the Facebooks and the Apples, you'll see that a lot of it was dumb luck. So first of all, I would not be basing my entrepreneurial activities on the example of these ultra lucky businesses. What I would rather do is base my entrepreneurial strategies based on what works to make most people successful as a business person. Now, what's the difference between a multimillionaire and a billionaire? What's the difference? Luck. That's it. That's it. A multimillionaire who has a long track record, 10, 20 years or longer, of being successful in business is somebody who's just as accomplished as Google, as Facebook, as any of these guys, and perhaps much more accomplished. The only difference is that they didn't get that super lucky product or service. Another thing you should consider when looking at business operators to see whether or not they are one-hit wonders that just grew huge and then they can launch off of that, or whether or not they're actually successful and consistent entrepreneurs. So, for example, let's look at Zuckerberg. He's had one hit, Facebook, right? And he's been a good operator, and he's maneuvered, and he's done his things, and, you can look at his history, but he's really just done one thing. So he's smart, there's no question, but I look at him more of a very lucky guy, whereas unproven yet, in my opinion. A proven entrepreneur is more like a Steve Jobs, who was able to make Apple successful, and then he was able to make Pixar successful, but then he failed with Next. He actually failed initially in some major products with Apple, but he came back and he made Apple successful again, not with just one good product, but two very huge iconic products: the iPod and iPhone and iPads, I suppose, those three. So that is more an example, in my opinion, Steve Jobs, of a true entrepreneur or operator, because he's proven himself multiple times. The world is filled with business people who had huge success in one company, and then they figure out, well, I'm a great business person, and then they go to other business and they fail. This happens all the time. I'll give you an example close to home with me, where, well, not really, but a good friend of mine, his relative of his, I'm not going to say who, this is years back, so very successful guy in a particular industry, started a company, built it up, and then sold it off for, I think it was like $10 million. Back in the day when It was like 15 years ago when 10 million was a lot of money. Well, it's still a lot of money today. But anyway, so he sells his business because he knew how to operate that type of business. And then he decided, well, I'm going to go into another type of business. So he took a bunch of money from his sale of his first business, went into another business, and he lost most of it. Not such a good operator. Let's look at the guy who started up Victoria's Secrets. Started up the store, I believe the store Victoria's Secrets, big lingerie line of clothing now, of course. And he started up that business and named after his wife, I believe it was Victoria. And they had 6 stores. They built up 6 stores over years. And then they sold it to some group of people. And he got $6 million for it, I believe it was. So he then proceeded to start a new line of baby clothes for whatever reason. And so his baby business bankrupted him. He lost all his money within a short period of time. Meanwhile, within a year or two, the people who buy Victoria's Secrets built it into a $500 million business. So these two things combined, the guy ended up killing himself jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. So you have to ask yourself, was he a great business operator? Well, he was good at operating those stores, and he had an idea of it work with Victoria's Secrets, but he wasn't able to make it work again in other businesses. So I have another guy I know who made some money because he just bought real estate when the real estate market was really low. It was in a crash, so he took a risk. He bought it, and he bought a few places, and they grew in value during the greatest housing bubble in history during this time. And then he decided he was going to get into other things. And again, same story. He made the mistake of thinking because he bought real estate at the right time, kind of like buying a lottery ticket at the right time, he thought he was this great business person. And it turns out he wasn't. So the lesson I'm trying to convey to you is that there's a lot of people out there who just, they got lucky. And a lot of people out there who assume that just because they got successful in one business, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be successful in all other businesses. It's very common to see this type of failure after success. So there's a strategy to come out of this. I'm not trying to dissuade you from getting into business. I'm just trying to help you to be able to better evaluate what you see out there. What you want to look for is you want to look for people who have success in several businesses over a long period of time, in several types of business. One of the things that irks me, I see rich kids who go work for their fathers, and then the business continues to grow as they're working at their father's business, and then they proclaim themselves to be business experts. It's like, I'm not going to name names. You see these guys, I just went working for my father, and his business was only worth $5 million, and we built it up together to $100 million, and I'm a great business person. And I took that money, and I took it and went into something else. It's good. They went into something else, and they showed that they're able to do something else. That's point one. But what they don't get, the rich kids don't get, is that the hardest part about starting a business is figuring out the business model, figuring out the market, coming up with workflows, coming up with structures, building up the initial money that to start a business. That's the hard part. I know, I've done it. My first company, I started with $200, and I went into an industry that had nothing to do with anything my parents were doing. I didn't use contacts from my parents. I didn't use money from my parents. I was on my own. And that's very different from just going in and working for your dad in their business. You're missing a huge part of the chunk of the process. You're missing a huge chunk of the process. Those initial stages of starting a business is very difficult. It takes a lot of skill to do that. Anyway, so what you want to do is you want to look for people who've had multiple businesses and a long track record. Another thing that irks me that I see out there is people who are going to teach you how to be in business, but it's clear that they have one business to teach you how to be in business. So that tells you about their business experience. In full disclosure, I have a business course, but this is the first business course I've ever put out, and I've been in business for 28 years, right? My original business was import-export of rare fish for public aquariums, collectors, high-end pet stores, and they had pet product lines and so on. Nothing to do with education, nothing to do with business training, nothing to do with coding. And I've had several other things in between. I've had some ups and some downs, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, I won't get into the details here. So yeah, I hope this discussion is useful for you to help you to evaluate the reality of the landscape out there. One of the things you have to do as an entrepreneur is you have to learn to become brutally honest with your assessments of everything out there and yourself. Having sugar-coated news or sugar-coated opinions from people about what you're doing is not going to help you at all. Having brutally dishonest opinions also is not going to help you at all. And your ability to be able to assess things as they really are is a huge skill to have. So this is like the first step, the first discussion here to help you to understand how to see the landscape out there. This is going to help you in terms of your own business choices, your own business practices, choosing partners if you decide to take them on, being able to assess business opportunities, etc. Having these business eyes, if you will, is important. You start developing them. So when you're looking around out there, I'm assuming you're watching this because you want to become an entrepreneur, a freelancer, etc. When you're looking around out there, consider what I've just talked about, and I think it will help you to have a better idea in terms of how to proceed. Anyway, I hope this is useful to you guys. Bye-bye.